extreme fire danger warnings are issued for large parts of New South Wales. Also this hour, Tasmanian Premier Jeremy Rockliff's office accused of leaking texts to damage the now ex-Attorney General as talks of the state government falling before the next election continue. The Yes campaign planning to staff every polling booth in the country while the Greens deal with a split over their stance on the Indigenous voice to Parliament. And in sport this hour, the party pies continue as Collingwood celebrates their nail-biting 4-point win against Brisbane in the AFL Grand Final in front of more than 100,000 people at the MCG. Good evening. We want to begin this hour with breaking news. Residents and campers have fled in Gippsland with emergency warnings issued for multiple bushfires burning out of control right across eastern Victoria. At 11:30am this morning, an emergency bushfire warning was issued for Briangalong, Culloden and surrounds. People living or camping in that area told to evacuate immediately. The advice in the central Gippsland township of Loch Sport was for people to shelter indoors immediately due to a grass fire, bring pets inside and close vents, authorities saying around 1pm it was too late to leave. A watch and act also issued this afternoon for Erica, Rawson and surrounding towns with further advice to evacuate. Another emergency warning issued for Forge Creek with advice to shelter indoors immediately. That was later downgraded to advice. We've seen wind gusts of up to 90 kilometres per hour which have contributed to fanning the flames, but winds are becoming lighter. Also breaking, and watch and act also issued around midday New South Wales with firefighters and water bombing aircraft responding to a bushfire burning in the vicinity of the Snowy Riverway east of Dalgety, burning towards Mafra in the Monaro LGA. Extreme and high fire danger ratings in place now for multiple parts of New South Wales, large parts of the state in the coming days. That includes the Greater Sydney region, Hunter region, Central West and Northern Slopes. We've heard recently from Emergency Management Minister Murray Watt. He says Australia is much better prepared for bushfires this summer compared to the months leading up to Black Summer. Those fires in 2019 and 2020 destroyed more than 9,000 buildings and led to the death of 34 people, as well as a further 445 deaths caused by smoke. The office of Tasmanian Premier Jeremy Rockliffe has been accused of leaking text to damage the now ex-Attorney General. Eliza Archer has hit back after resigning from Parliament, with talk now of the country's last Liberal government falling before her replacement is announced. Senior reporter Darby Travers has the latest.
The Tasmanian government is still dealing with another blow following the resignation of Attorney General Eliza Archer following bullying allegations. It has been revealed that Mrs. Archer sent a message last year where she said she was sick of victim survivors. She has now responded today saying it was taken out of context and accusing Premier Jeremy Rockliffe of leaking the message to damage her. In addition to Cabinet, she has also quit Parliament and the Liberal Party. No by-elections will occur because of Tasmania's lower house voting system, so instead a countback will occur for her replacement. However, senior figures have told The Australian that they do expect the Tasmanian government to fall if the Labor opposition moves a no-confidence motion before Archer's replacement is confirmed. The only Liberal government in the country has already been in minority for a number of months after Lara Alexander and John Tucker quit to sit as independents.
I expect a very high standard and I lead by example when it comes to a high standard in terms of the culture and people being valued within the workplace, but also a very strict ministerial code of conduct.
The most recent polling for the House of Assembly has the Liberals at 38%, Labor at 32%, Greens at 14% and Independents and Other at 15%. Because of the proportional hair-clerk system, this might not be the best for the government, with the possibility of a Labor-Greens government. The polling is also down more than 10% compared to the 48.7% that the party actually got at the 2021 state election. The next Tasmanian state election will be held by June 2025.
6 people travelling in one vehicle have been killed after a crash in the Northern Territory. Detectives from the Major Crash Investigation Unit say a Mitsubishi four-wheel drive collided with a heavy vehicle travelling along the Stewart Highway south of Pine Creek. The driver of the vehicle and passenger of the heavy vehicle received non-life-threatening injuries, but 6 occupants, all believed to be in the four-wheel drive, died. Police say it was a confronting crash which has resulted in significant loss of life, and investigations are ongoing. And 5 people have died after a horror weekend on Queensland roads. 2 male passengers were killed in a single vehicle crash around 3 a.m. this morning when a Ford Falcon came off the road, then collided with a raised sugarcane railway line. 1 woman died after 2 vehicles burst into flames after a crash in Logan. A 21-year-old driver also died after a ute rolled into a dry creek, and a 5th person died when their motorcycle collided with a four-wheel drive near Hervey Bay. The ABC reports that as of last Sunday, 207 people had died on Queensland roads so far this year. Victorian Independent Labor MP Will Fowle says he will not attend Parliament until a police investigation into alleged sexual assault concludes, but he will not resign. Fowle's the member for Ringwood says he has not been contacted by anyone about the allegations since they were first reported in early August. At the time, then Premier Dan Andrews said his office referred the matter to Victoria Police. Fowle's resigned from the Parliamentary Labor Party but remains a member of the broader party. He added on Facebook that he will continue to work in the electorate and make representations on behalf of his constituents. New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has tested positive to COVID-19 just 13 days out from the general election and the start of early voting tomorrow. A spokesperson for Mr Hipkins says he has cold and flu symptoms that began yesterday and will be isolating for 5 days, or at least until he returns a negative test result. Hipkins will also continue his engagements that he can undertake via Zoom. Opposition leader Christopher Luxon wished Hipkins the best via social media. The PM previously tested positive back in March last year. He became Prime Minister early this year after the resignation of Jacinda Ardern. House prices have smashed records, fully reversing 2022 lows. Sydney leads the country with prices growing by 6.86% since the start of the year and 0.48% last month, according to PropTrack's Home Price Index report. Melbourne is up 0.25% last month, and for the first time since 2022 has seen a positive annual growth. National prices are up 4.31% in 2023 and 0.38% last month. The Yes campaign is planning to staff every polling booth in the country as they look for a comeback, despite polls showing a consistent lead for the No campaign in the Indigenous Voice to Parliament referendum. Polls conducted over the past few weeks have shown Yes in the 30s and 40s, while No is up to the 60s. National Senator Bridget McKenzie today said it would be unprecedented for the referendum to get up given the lack of bipartisan support. She said that if the referendum was only about constitutional recognition, in excess of 95% of Australians would vote yes. It comes as the Greens deal with a split over their voice stance. As broken by 6 News, the Australian Greens First Nations Network, also known as Black Greens, has released a letter addressed to all Greens members and supporters, encouraging them to vote no or abstain from voting. They say that the voice cannot accurately represent all Indigenous Australians, describing it as Labor's voice and a powerless advisory body. They added that the referendum does not guarantee there will be progress towards truth and treaty. The group has also called on Greens members and supporters to demand the federal government implement the recommendations from both the 1991 Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody and the 1997 Bringing Them Home report. A Greens spokesperson has told 6 News that party MPs will be working hard to ensure the voice is successful, saying that the party respects that there is a diversity of views within Black Greens and Black Greens are able to self-determine their own position. However, the Greens remain committed to campaigning yes. Well, for more, we spoke with election and polling analyst Dr. Kevin Bonham about the possibility of a turnaround for the Yes campaign with less than 2 weeks to go until referendum day. It's clearly gone down. I think every poll since after July has shown No in the lead of some kind, be that through binary or be that through with the undecided option. Has there ever been a case from that kind of margin? I think it's negative plus -10 in some areas for Yes. Ever been a turnaround like that in a 3-week period or less than 3 weeks as we have now?
I'm not aware of any case where there's been that kind of turnaround. I have been looking at the polling for the Republic in 1999, and you can make a case that there was a bit of a late rally in the Republic polling that might have been worth 3 or 4 points, but then the polling overestimated the yes vote anyway, which is what commonly happens in referendum and ballot measure type polling. And so it would need there to be something seriously wrong with the current polls. That's a new thing that we don't know about, I think, at this point for yes to get back.
Now, disinformation and misinformation about polling has been a real problem, and we've seen it on social media for quite some time. What are the main false claims that you have seen about polling, especially as it relates to the voice referendum? And I know they've been going on for a while, but they seem to have really ramped up the past couple of months.
This is the worst electoral event I've seen for online denial and disinformation regarding polling. A lot of it is levied at Newspoll particularly, which has always been the case, and you get stuff like Newspoll polls landlines, which they haven't done since 2019 and which they haven't done exclusively since 2015. You get there's been a lot of false claims about polling and previous elections, false claims that that polls said that the coalition would win the most recent New South Wales, Victorian and federal elections. In all cases, this is not true. In all cases, the polls clearly showed Labor winning, although there was some doubt as to whether it will be in majority or not. And there was a lot of spinning about results by the media, with media claiming that results were, that these elections were on a knife edge when they were not, that sort of thing. There's a lot of disinformation linking sort of Newspolls past record to Murdoch, and saying that because Newspoll is published by a Murdoch outlet, that therefore Murdoch controls all the questions and designs the poll, and that the poll was all skewed to coalition, when the track record of Newspoll shows that this isn't true at all. We get, now that people are becoming aware that most of the polling is done online, we're also getting a lot of disinformation about online polls, a lot of claims that they are basically opt-in polls where anyone can just sign up and immediately take a poll, which is not true, not reliably true, and a lot of claims that only older people take online polls, when the fact is that people of all ages take them, and that pollsters can decide who they invite to specific polls, and can also adjust their sample using weightings if they happen to get too many people of one movement. There's so many, but a strange one is claims that polls said that no would win the same-sex marriage postal vote. This is completely false. Every poll for ages before the same-sex marriage postal vote said that yes will win easily, and in fact, yes did not win by quite as much as the poll suggested.
Is it fair to say that we can trust the polls, at least acknowledging, there's always a 1 to 2%-ish margin of error, but is it fair to say they are generally reliable, especially the main ones, Resolve and Newspoll?
Well, we know things about these polls' performance at actual elections, although the number of elections that we have since the changes were made in 2019 is small, and with more elections we will get more of an accurate estimate of how good they are. I think that some of them, Newspoll particularly, has had an exceptional run in the last 4 elections, and it's too much to expect them to continue nailing elections to within 1% of the two-party preferred vote forever. But it does give an idea that polls are not getting worse. This is a global thing. That's another common myth, is that polls are getting worse and less accurate worldwide. It's actually not the case. It's been debunked in a comprehensive study.
Now, in terms of Newspoll, we know there were some changes recently to them, and I guess it's been hyped up by some people who seem to be denying it. Can you just run us through what exactly has, I guess, changed, and what more so has stayed the same as well, in terms of even not just how it's all done, but who's running it?
What happened recently was that Campbell White, who was basically in charge of the YouGov news poll, and Simon Levy, who is one of the analysts at YouGov, they were basically the people doing news poll, and they left to start their own polling company called Puglisi. And initially, YouGov kept doing news poll for one news poll, but then it was announced that the contract for news poll will be switched to Puglisi. So now it's a new company that's administering news poll, a new Australian company that's been contracted to run it, but it's basically the same people who were doing it for YouGov and who were doing it before that for Galaxy, before YouGov purchased Galaxy. So there's a lot of historic continuity there. What is different is that it's now a different panel of research participants, and that's also resulted in some changes to the way they are selecting respondents and what they are using in weighting and targeting. So it's not exactly the same, but it's still the same questions. It's still the same principal people, and it's probably going to behave in a similar manner. In fact, it looks so far from the two polls it's done that it's behaving much the same way.
The US federal government will avoid a shutdown for the next 45 days at least after an 11th hour stopgap funding bill passed through Congress. The bill passed the Republican-controlled House 335 to 91 with overwhelming Democratic support, then passed 88 to 9 in the Senate before President Joe Biden signed it into law. 6 News North American correspondent Wyatt Sharp has more.
There's been a couple members of Congress who have pledged to go without pay as a result of this. I mean, a lot of people often criticize that, members of Congress and members of government still get paid even in the midst of a government shutdown. So there have been some members of Congress who have pledged that they would not take pay or perhaps donate it to somewhere over the course of a government shutdown. And this is all, of course, in connection to the funding deadline and to the fact that it's kind of looming here. And there's, of course, a number of other components on it as well. There was a House vote on kind of a short-term funding measure that essentially would have prevented a government shutdown, but that failed to pass on Friday. So, I mean, really, there will be a number of things to watch on this front. Government shutdowns have obviously happened in the past, and not only do they impact kind of the day-to-day operations for the actual lawmakers and for people on Capitol Hill and in other branches of the U.S. government as well, but also they impact people and they impact the various government services that are available to people. So if a government shutdown does take place, then it is obviously likely that some of those key stakeholders that essentially are responsible for the government shutdown taking place will likely have some questions to answer.
I mean, what's next for the Democrats in the Senate after the death of Dianne Feinstein? She was, of course, 90 years old. She wasn't running for re-election, and she had been facing calls to resign, a real trailblazer in the Senate. But given that slim majority, what exactly does it mean?
Yeah, certainly there's a lot of looming issues that will kind of play into what this means for both parties, for that matter. I mean, certainly it's not just the Democratic Party that has the unfortunate issue of politicians who are in some of their elderly years, like Dianne Feinstein was. First of all, you obviously have reaction coming in from all sides of the political aisle. I mean, you even had Marco Rubio, who's about as conservative as it gets in terms of senators on Capitol Hill, who came out and posted a nice tribute to Dianne Feinstein, who was 90 years old at the time of her death today. And as of right now, I mean, the governor of California, as is always the case, whether it be a senator resigns midway through their term, or as has taken place here, a senator passes away midway through their term. Of course, Dianne Feinstein didn't have a whole lot left in terms of her amount of years that was actually left in her term. But the California governor, Gavin Newsom, has said that he wouldn't name a Democrat that is now running for the Senate seat. So when we think about that, we know there is Adam Schiff running, there is Barbara Lee running, and there is Katie Porter running. essentially Gavin Newsom saying he's not going to name any of those individuals to the Senate. There have been a lot of speculation as well as to who that could be. Newsom has previously pledged to fill any Senate vacancies with a Black woman, so that does narrow down the amount of people that could possibly fit into this new Senate role following the death of Dianne Feinstein. But